The other thing I found fascinating again is really the Damodaran-BOT architecture, the D-bot architecture, which I found phenomenal, especially the number of AI agents that you put into the architecture. Can you just unravel it for the audience? Because it's a fantastic architecture in terms of how to bring in that embedded knowledge of the man himself into the AI system.
So let me give you a little bit of background since I suspect many of your listeners are interested in finance, which is an area that I've been immersed in for, over 30 years now. So, I brought AI to Wall Street in, the early 90s, and my focus was on learning how to trade based on data. And it was like trading, like short-term trading, holding periods of a few days to a few hours.
Yeah.
So at one time I was doing a lot of high frequency trading where, I was trading, almost like, 0.1% of the volume of the New York Stock Exchange, just like a lot of high frequency trading. And that was phenomenally profitable. But my main emphasis was on short-term trading, learning from data to make, short-term predictions. So I'd been doing that for, I don't know, 17, 18 years. And in 2015, I had two conversations with my colleagues. One was with Scott Galloway, who's written the foreword for my book. And we had a conversation. It's on the internet, called "Should You Trust Your Money to a Robot?"
Yeah.
And we chatted, and at the end of it, he says, "Okay, so trading floors will disappear, but private equity and venture capital is safe." I'm like, "Yes, I think that's a fair way to put it. That's inherently human. Sort of long-term investing, long-term thinking is not something that the machine can do. It doesn't have enough data. There's no basis for it to do that. So that isn't the domain of long-term investing." That same week, ironically, I met with my colleague Aswath Damodaran, who's the guru of valuation on Wall Street,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we had this conversation about whether we could create a machine that could learn to think like him. And we decided at the time that it would be too hard, that his thinking, could not be systematized into a system at that time, given the state of the art of AI. But when ChatGPT came out, we revisited that, initial conversation. And I went back to Aswath and I said, should we try this again? And he said, yeah, it seems worthwhile. So I sort of initiated a project with one of my colleagues, Zhao Sidok, here at NYU. And at that time, I had no idea whether this would really work. But the idea was to systematize long-term investing in the same way that Damodaran thinks about it. Now, the reason this was feasible in my mind is because Damodaran is the only one out there, bar none, there's no exceptions, who has published the volume of valuations, right? No one else has published,
Absolutely.
the number of valuations that he has. So it's all out there, and it's been out there for years, right? So if you want to find, all the valuations that he's done, they're out there, right? His Musings on Markets newsletter gets, tens of millions of views every time he publishes anything. So it's something that people are looking at. So there was a lot of training data available, which made me optimistic that maybe a machine could learn from it. And so that's what we started initially. We just started by, giving the machine, all of his musings and writings and said, can you learn something from it? So when we ask you how to value a new company, you'll do it. So we tried that. It took 6 months to do that. It was a complete flop. I mean, it just doesn't work. You just can't do that. You can't just tell GPT or Claude or Gemini or whatever, hey, here are all the, you know, writings of Damodaran. Now learn something from them so that you're an oracle just like him. It just doesn't work. Right? So we had to get much more detailed about what he actually does, like literally get inside his process, get inside his head. And he was incredibly, helpful in enabling us to do that. And so we broke down his entire valuation process into a bunch of parts, and each of these parts are handled by something called an agent, right? So in AI, there's this notion of agents, and these multi-agent architectures are sort of beginning to get quite popular. By the way, they go back to the 70s, right? That
Yeah,
one of the people who came up with this, Alan Kay, got the
correct.
Turing Award in the 70s. So the idea of agents has been around for a long time, 50 years. But what's different now from 50 years ago is that at that time you had to program the agents. You had to talk to them in code. Now you can talk to them in English. So I can have a data acquisition agent and I tell the agent, "Hey, go grab every piece of fundamental data and, balance sheets and everything for Nvidia and load it into Aswath's quantitative model, and it goes off and yes, boss, goes off, does it, brings it, loads it. And so we verified that it does it correctly, right? So there's this sort of layer of what I call general intelligence in AI now that you can use to your benefit. And that's why there's so much excitement about AI, because people feel that they can build these applications very quickly, right? So same idea. You have these agents that go off and they know how to grab financial data, right? So you might have another, and so we have another agent that, let's say, goes and looks at consensus estimates, right? Because that's important information.
Correct. Correct.
Another agent that figures out, what are the comparable companies
Mm.
to this one, right? So you tell the agent, like, get all the financials, get the price to forward earning ratios for all similar companies. It knows how to do that. It has the intelligence to do that. Right? So and similarly, we have a report writer that says, okay,
Yeah.
now that you have everything, write the report. And then there's a critic that looks at the report and says, is this correct? Have you cited the sources? Is it the correct length? Is it clear? Are the charts clear? Do they have captions? Right. So the critic then says, let's polish this up and make sure it's real and trustable by whoever's going to look at it. Right. So trustable is key, and I'm sure we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
So that's what the agent really does. And now it's, very close to being a commercial tool where all you do is, you go to the front end, and I should give you a demonstration of this one of these days. It's fascinating
No, it
that,
was really fascinating. It was
you know,
really
you,
fascinating.
you give it a symbol, you say value NVIDIA, and it goes off and it says, do you have a thesis, or should I generate the thesis? Right. And so you as the human can tell it, I have a thesis, or no, you generate the thesis. And, you know, press the button and it's off to the races. And 15 minutes later, it sends you a report, 5 to 10 page report in the spirit of the Damodaran, right? So it's meant to be a report that he might have written on a company, at the current time. So that's how it works. At the moment is give it a company, gives you back a report. Now, I'll just end by saying, how do I think this will be used? How do I think people will use it? My conjecture is that I think it'll make analysts and just people in general much more productive, because you'll be able to run scenarios against it, right? You'll be able to say, assume that the tariff wars will escalate. How would you value BYD if these tariff wars escalate? Versus assume that Trump's bluffing, and that this is a negotiation tactic, and that in a few years we'll be back to business as usual, right? So you can give it these scenarios, and which is very difficult and time consuming to do manually, right? Because you
Yeah.
have, imagine the amount of work involved in saying, okay, now with a different set of assumptions, how does the valuation change, right? It's not just a question of changing formulas, it's a question of like changing your thinking and your
Mm.
reasoning with the new set of assumptions. And that is what I find really exciting about a tool like this, is that it brings a new level of intelligence, at your fingertips, and I talk about agents at your fingertips. I mean, Bill
Yeah.
Gates used to talk about information at your fingertips, right? Now we've got agents at your fingertips, and that's a tremendously powerful capability that's provided by AI, which I think will, get increasingly used going forward.